Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to StarLadder and iLeague StarSeries Season 3. Obnoxious with me is Lothar casting some of the matches that we've got today. And there's 5 more to go. We've already just had Stanodachi versus Pavel, which ended up in a 3-1 series for Stanodachi at the end of a grueling Quest Rogue over Quest Rogue matches that he had to get himself together. He felt a little bit tilted after a slight misplay that he made, but should still be able to keep himself together for the next match he's got to do today against Sho. Next up is Kolento versus JJ. I really want to see Kolento play.
Yeah, we didn't see him playing in a tournament for a while. I mean, he went to China to play in Gold Series, right, if I'm not mistaken, where he actually won with 2,000 competitors or something like that, which is crazy, right? But at the same time, he lately was top ranked at several servers at the same time, so it's a big feat. I mean, it's an achievement, let's say like that. With my pronunciation, you could actually understand something else. So it's an interesting match to see, definitely. The same goes for JJ, who actually plays a lot of other card games with Life Coach and not that much Hearthstone lately. But you know what's even funnier? Kolento was actually mocking Hearthstone pros with a tweet after seeing that Stan did burn the quest. He was like, "Should I try it as well?" And then,
is that a next level tactic?
Yeah, and then JJ answered, "No, I'm gonna ban your rogue." And that's what they did. They actually both banned rogues.
No big surprise there. I think Rogue is one of those decks that it's one of the most banned classes, I think, since the expansion came out. You either ban Rogue or you target it in Conquest. It's not that complicated. Either you build full aggro and you go all in on that Rogue. Just hit face very fast and, as repeatedly as you can. The problem you often encounter by targeting Rogue is that Quest Rogue is a deck that, despite all your attempts, you might fall apart against, and if you do, then suddenly the rest of their lineup can probably take your aggro lineup, and that makes things a bit more complicated, where when we see the lineups from both these players, that's a little bit more balanced, right? They're well-rounded, mid-rangey decks. It seems very different than what we've seen last time I cast the StarLadder. It was all aggro.
Yeah, I would say that there's a healthy diversification of archetypes right now. Some people are trending towards the aggro, some people are trending towards the mid-range control, but at the same time, I don't see like a fully blown out, one archetype being the best in the game, and one lineup is just dominating everyone, So
yeah, it's usually it's very diverse still, even in tournament settings where that's where we experience the drought of creativity the first time. It's nice to see that there's still some diversity. And speaking of diversity, Priest is alive. Priest is still a deck that people play, and it turns out to work okay for a lot of the people that bring it. I don't know if JJ is going to be bringing Dragon Priest or Purify Priest. I've seen him play the Dragon list more, but Purify has also risen in popularity recently.
Yep, that's true. Although I can't really say I'm a fan of the Priest decks, but it's exciting to watch. That's for sure, because they can either go off kind of like a miracle deck, right? Or the Purify decks are kind of interesting as well. And now I also find it interesting, everyone was shitting on Purify, right? And I remember that me and you talked about it when it was released, that it's actually not a bad card, it's just bad timing. That it released
yeah, exactly. It's
just an okay card. Yeah, it's an okay card with an interesting effect, and people just mad because mad.
We're such hipsters sometimes, but it's one of those things where I look at a lot of the designs that come out, and sometimes it takes a long time before those cards are played. I just want to point out that Stone Tuzzborn and Youthful Brewmasters are now competitive cards. We saw Wisps for a while.
Dude,
things change.
What up, the Ferryman?
Yeah, I remember people calling that card unplayably bad.
Because it's so worse than the Brewmaster, right? So much worse than the Brewmaster. And yet, when you need more than 2 Brewmasters, who comes in handy? Who comes to help? Who gives you the hand? It's the Ferryman.
It's not a bad card. Just needed a really, really powerful quest to make it good, I guess. Over-the-top quest, if anything. So far, I don't think any plans are in store to really modify the way that deck works. So these cards should keep being played. In the meantime, lineup-wise, we see Kolento and the Druid, Paladin, Shaman plan. So big difference here is Priest and the Druid, which are very, very different decks. I don't know what type of deck, again, JJ is bringing for the sake of, his priesthood. I think if this is Dragon Priest, the Elemental Shaman matchup is going to be pretty damn sweet for him. If this is Elemental Shaman, of course, as priests tend to play a value game that is very, very hard to compete with. And I mean, ridiculously hard.
Yeah, that is correct. I have nothing to add here.
I don't know if, against Paladin, it probably fares a bit worse because they tend to, again, have a very difficult value game to beat. So it's like Shaman has value plays that Priest has better value and then Paladin just outvalues Priest by virtue of having number one really big boards early and then also getting themselves a few extra Tyrians in the process. And it's interesting to note that we've seen a lot of mind controls in Priest nowadays. Not something we saw recently, but yeah, we've seen mind controls and silences come up in competitive Priest decks because Paladins are everywhere, and it's not a deck that you can easily come out ahead of, even if you get your decent value Draconic Operative train going. You tend to get stopped pretty harshly, so sometimes all you need is a silence or mind control. These one-of tech cards have been helping Priest push a little bit past some of those value games. It's pretty cool.
Well, then we need to see what kind of Priest it is. I mean, I would love to see a mind control actually on deck. As a tech, even you play one and suddenly your opponent's like, uh-oh, I'm going to lose this game because of that one card. Because it's so much value and the tempo swing in one card.
Yeah, it really doesn't take all that much. I mean, I guess technically SuperJJ could be trying to target J Druid, because we see the Priest here. If it's Dragon Priest, it's an okay matchup. I wouldn't say it's even. I'd say the J Druid is still probably slightly favored in the longer games. But you can always get those huge Draconic Operative curves going, and that will put the Druid on the back foot. If you're a Purified Priest, though, you would do very, very well against Jade. On average, I'd say Purified Priest has such a good matchup against Jade Druid that you could justify bringing it just to target that one class. And if that's what JJ is doing, maybe that Druid is going to be sitting a little bit useless in Kolento's lineup.
I'll have to see. To be honest, I kind of feel uncomfortable with countering Jade Druids because they can always cheat out, play an Innervate, and I'm like, well, crap. I'm behind now. How can I play from behind, right? When you're playing against a Jade Druid. Unless they just drop, dead for several times.
Sure. I mean, it can happen sometimes where Jade Druid just beats themselves with awkward hands. But either way, these two players probably not on the aggro side. I guess Kolento could have chosen to bring aggro Shaman. It's a deck that we've seen a bit of, but if you did that, you would not be banning that rogue. So I expect this to be a mid-range / control lineup from both players, probably more on the mid-rangey side. And I mean, who knows? Maybe control Shaman shows up and makes a splash. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't seem like Kolento's bringing any aggro decks, to be honest. Like, even if the Druid can't be an aggro deck. I don't see a point in this lineup.
Yeah, let's just talk about Kolento a little bit, right? A lot of people remember him from the very early days of Hearthstone, where he was one of the highest performing players for a while, and then, he turned to focus on his stream for a long time, and people called him washed up, and Kolento's just a bad tournament player. He got lucky early, and nothing, he doesn't care about the game anymore. And then Ungoro comes along and says, you know what? Suddenly the best decks are not OTK decks, and they're not aggro decks, and Kolento says, I'm interested in that. I'm totally digging the idea of building mid-rangey decks with perfect techs and really fine-tuning of balance to make those decks work. And that's where he thrives the most. Him and Strifecrow are two players that work extremely well in these, grinder metagames that they can make use of their skills in. I really, really dig that Kolento's back in the competitive scene.
It's very similar to his former teammate, Strifecrow, right? They had very similar paths, let's say like that. They both were really winning a lot when it comes to tournaments. Of course, Kolento had more success, but Strifecrow was actually not that bad when it comes to his titles and the prizes won, right? And they actually just focused on streaming, didn't play the game for competitively for a while, and now they're both back actually, which is interesting. They still stream because why would they stop? Hearthstone might mainly focus on streaming, right? But in this case, Kolento is also looking into the tournament scene. I'd love to see him back. I actually remember when he won the Kinguin Pro League that we did cast in the past. I was like 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago. I feel like.
Time flies by. It's been forever. Remember, this is the first big event that ended up casting, and it looks like the match is underway, and it's going to be the Shaman mirror match with, of course, Fireflies indicating an elemental package. Firefly, a really interesting card, by the way. And Shaman specifically because of its buff ability by with Flametongue Totem. And, Stonehill Defender kind of falls on the same end of that spectrum, where the card on its own is often not good enough, but when you can get yourself extra things from below, and extra Tar Creepers, those can come in handy for, elemental enabling or just totem synergy. I wonder if any of these guys will bring Evolve to the table, because we have seen Evolve come in since Stonehill Defender and Firefly, they end up being played in the same deck. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even be surprised.
You think so? Well, I would actually be surprised, because most of the Shamans are bringing Devolve instead of Evolve, and I cannot think of any other spot in the deck to have both, like, Devolve and Evolve at the same time. So either have one or other, and Devolve seems just to be more important because sometimes you just fall behind, and you need the Devolve to help the lights. I mean, sorry, to help out the storms, right? Help out Milestone Portal, help out the Lightning Storm, because basically what Devolve is doing is like adding spell power, kind of like.
Sure, because usually it's reducing the stats of minions.
Usually it reduces the HP, which is basically the same, but sometimes it's just better than a single spell power because it can reduce more than one. So while when you think about Evolve, they need to... It's like Bloodlust. It's almost the same. You win when you have creatures on board, right? And it's still not guaranteed with Evolve. I understand your point, but at the same time, I just don't see it happening,
Well, right now I don't see it either. I mean, that Hot Spring Guardian from SuperJJ tells me that he's definitely not playing Evolve, but there have been lists that, are adding, double Bloodlust, double Evolve. It's like it's a really weird deck because it's not an elemental deck, it's not a Jade deck, it's just a little bit of everything sprinkled in, and the goal is just to seize board and keep it. I don't think this is going to be one of those things, though. This definitely is looking a lot more like a Jade Elemental value package on Kolento's side, and the Hot Spring Guardian, just typical Elemental build on SuperJJ's. Very, very similar builds. I expect them to have, not an identical, but near identical one. I would like to point out the Jade Lightning presence in Kolento's hand, which is interesting to me because that's not always there. You tend to see a lot of Fire Plume Phoenixes in the pure elemental builds. Mm-hmm. But the Jade Lightning here means that he's probably running Aya Blackbot. He's probably running Jade Chieftains at the top end. So a little bit more of a straightforward deck than just a value generation one like the elementals.
Yep, that's a good point. Not really any surprising card right now in any of the players' hands. Like usual text, right? So, but interesting to see the synergy between Firefly and the overall deck, right? As you brought in before, it's an elemental, of course. It also has synergy with your totems because Healing Totem heals actually the one HP that is on Firefly. The Flaming Totem boosts its attack to 3, which is relevant, so no one can actually just ignore it. It doesn't die in mirror matches to Milestone Portals, which is also very important. So it's something that you don't really think about so much, but at the same time, it's a crucial part of the deck. The 1-drop that doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, it's the fact that you have this threat looming over your opponent, because oftentimes that threat on its own is worth a lot. And this is kind of what we saw here. JJ hesitating. You're looking at this turn thinking, why is he taking so long to play a 3-drop into this, as this seems pretty standard? The truth is, if there's a Flame Tongue on this board, suddenly Kolento just races ahead, and JJ has no good answer. But he was looking at this thinking, all right, if Flame Tongue comes out, then I get a decent Maelstrom Portal turn with my Flame Tongue for the follow-up, which means that I can catch up. But he knows that he's in the catch-up position, and not in the position where he's dictating the way this game is going. This, though, having this board left over, might change the way he feels about this, because this is very, very good for him.
All right, I'm kind of interested. Why did Kolento not use the weapon and the 1/1 to just kill it outright this turn? What is the reasoning behind just leaving it around? Can't think of anything. You have something to help me with. Because his plan was obviously to play Tolvir next turn, and that means.
Maybe that's enough to actually just take up the entire board. and didn't see the need to use the weapon charge just yet. Maybe he wants to keep the weapon charge in case Flame Tongue comes down after the Tolvir comes up, so on turn 5 and 6 he can then use that weapon in conjunction with Jade Lightning to clean up some of the bigger minions left over. But yeah, getting rid of that. The thing is, when you're killing a 1/3 and there's no guarantee that there's a Flame Tongue, it doesn't feel particularly optimal, to take that line. Whereas now you can really adjust your plays based on what comes up next. So after you see the Flame Tongue, definitely that Jade Claws is looking like it has to kill something. But until you see it, there's no rush to commit the 2 damage.
Point. At the same time, though, in this matchup, the 2 damage, when the big minions will start coming up, the 2 damage doesn't seem so relevant, right? Because usually you need that damage to actually kill a minion because of the threat, like the Flame Tongue Totem, right? And in this situation, he just lost most of his board because of the fact that he did wait for it. And I also was interested because he did heal the Firefly, so he was playing around Malsum Portal, but at the same time, he didn't sacrifice his 1/1.
But it's kind of an in-between. It's kind of an in-between play, is what I see what you mean. You're just saying that if he's committing to one line of basically defense, then why not commit to the full thing, right?
Kinda, but
okay, sure. So it's like a halfway play. It went multiple directions. If you play around one specific thing, then you're protecting against the rest. I think in this case, he was just hedging his bets, saying whatever happens, I'm probably fine. I only literally lose or get punished by Flame Tongue and Maelstrom together. And that's precisely what JJ had, but there was no way of really identifying that before that turn came up. So
it's different. It's so interesting to see like players having different ideas of how the game can progress. Right? It's just not obvious that you make a mistake. It can be just a plan that you want to set up. Sometimes you just see that it's so different. Every other player has different idea how to progress with the same game. All right, let's focus on what's happening right now with Kolento and JJ. Kolento did play slow on turn 5, opting for the Manatite Totem to just put another minion that has to be just destroyed by your opponent. So he baits out a Fire Elemental on a minion that has 0 attack, an example, which is fine. From Kolento's perspective, because that's the best possible trade you can do basically, and at the same time he has Lightning Storm and Malsum Portal to help out cleaning up the board at some point when he's being threatened.
Yeah, but this is one of those weird spots where Kolento could not possibly have anticipated JJ having that exact combination of cards, because this is a pretty tricky one. That Devolve could come in absolutely at the perfect time here for Kolento. I mean, I was looking at his hand thinking, the Manatite improved the hand that he had because he was fighting off against so much. But it wasn't enough on its own unless you're drawing to specific outs. And the Evolve and Lightning Storm were definitely 2 of these outs. And Kolento looks like he's playing a board softening game for now. He's just trying to lower the amount of stuff on the board. Over time, we saw him just set up the Manatite, try to mitigate the damage that way, and buy himself time until he can find a board clear. I wouldn't be, I'm curious to see if he runs, a single copy of Volcano in there, if that's something that he deems relevant. There's really a lot to be said about playing slowly as Shaman. Usually in the mirror match, you have enough time to do it.
But now look at that. The Evolve came in handy, but it's still kind of awkward. That 1-drop with the Divine Shield. Oh.
I'm Flame Elementaling and Stonehill defending, but you do what you want. I like setting up the Tolvir Stone Shaper on the following turn. It's really not that bad. Again, the idea here is that you're softening up the board, reducing the amount of power on it or health on it for your follow-up. And this sets up beautifully for turn 7 with the Tolvir and the Hot Spring Guardian, which are very common occurrences with the Stonehill Defender. I really, really dig Kolento's lines here. Super slow, super methodical, not wasteful at all. Well, JJ has a card in hand he wants to play on turn 8, probably. And that's going to be Kolento's issue.
But at the same time, the turn 8 doesn't seem so appealing for Kalimos. Like, what do? The Storm? Well, not really needed right now. Your opponent doesn't have anything, right? Spawning 2/2s? Well, your board is full. You might actually, play some minions this turn and trade some minions, so you will still be looking at an entire board. You should probably keep the Kalimos after your opponent's AoE turn, or just keep it for the crucial AoE yourself. So I don't think like the turn 8 for Kalimos will be actually something that JJ is looking for. But at the same time, I feel like the Manatite Totem is a blessing here, because it puts some pressure that your opponent has to deal with, but at the same time, you don't lose the card advantage.
I think that's a really big upside of Kalimos on 8 here, is your opponent's already forced to respond to the board with AoE. So you probably see an AoE turn here from Kolento. If there's any chance that Kolento is holding AoE, you should see it come out just about now. So then that Kalimos refill is looking pretty good. Kalimos, even for 6 damage in some spots, can be a blessing. There's also the chance that JJ is running Bloodlust and goes for Hot Spring Guardian, Manatide, Hero Power, tries to refill that board up.
Let's see what actually a lot of some rolls first. Yeah. Because if he gets 2 high rolls, he gets 1. Okay. It's still a decent outcome because the Tolvir doesn't die to the board. But now the question for JJ, how do you proceed? You have a Fire Elemental.
This is so awkward.
Every single source of damage is like, I don't really feel good about this. Apart from the 1-drop going into the Divine Shield.
So there's the obvious idea of, hey, I play Hot Spring, I heal my Dark Iron Dwarf, but then you're left with 5 mana. So I guess that line of play lets you maximize the amount of stuff you put down. So Hero Power, Manatide plus Hot Spring. While you're losing the Dark Iron Dwarf to Maelstrom Portal afterwards, you're still protecting it from immediate trade. And even though it lets the Tolvir stay alive, you're still ahead on board. So you're asking Kolento to have a second AoE turn. And since last turn he did not play an Elemental, Kalimos is not a possibility.
And he did play Devolve as well. So the options are getting less and less probable.
So I kind of like this line of play from JJ here. Just, again, he held the Manatide for the post-AoE turn, which is exactly what happened here. Ended up keeping himself some extra card draw, stays ahead on the board, and sets up Kalimos whenever he pleases. And this is one of these spots where we could start seeing some phase damage being done. A Tempo Hex, those things are pretty common in spots like these.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely good play here.
And the Fire Elemental, like everything here just looks beautiful. There's a big board being built. The damage is actually put in a way it's most efficient because it's 2+3 into a 5/3 minion and 1/1 going into a 0/1. Your 4/4 still attacking phase, so you maintain pressure and board control at the same time, and your opponent is facing a really awkward board.
This is one of these turns or one of these games where you might see Kalimos just go a little bit, get a little bit facey here, because the amount of damage he's putting out, the big drawback, and this is nothing to neglect, is the fact that if you hit your opponent in the face for 6 at any point, and he has his own Kalimos, you're screwed. So you usually want to use it as the killing blow, more so than a setup. So it's probably going to be a slower turn here by JJ than just an all-in.
I mean, he could just go for Aya, even the Firefly if he wants to. Like, he still replaces it with the Fire Elemental. But he still plays a minion just for that threat of his synergy, right? So I think it's important to play the Firefly this turn.
I mean, you've already seen the Storm. You've already seen Devolve. I think you really want to put some heat on Kolento here. And as you can see here, the fact that Aya's Black Bus present leads me to believe these two guys are running very similar deck lists. There's really nothing that springs as abnormal here. I wonder if maybe one of them is running Volcano and the other is choosing Storm. We've seen Lightning Storm get cut out of many decks recently.
Mm-hmm.
People just do not like the card as much as they used to anymore. It's a bit too clunky. And it's better served just being board presence or a complete board sweep, such as Volcano. And JJ is just setting up that Kalimos.
Interesting. Second Evolve. Holy moly. That means he is playing every single AoE possible in the deck. Like, I mean, actually that's nonsense because you always play that. But in this case, the second Evolve is an interesting tech choice.
We often see the one-of Devolve, right? Which is fairly standard as an extra way to handle some of the stuff that comes your way against stuff like Paladin. Having the Devolve is amazing to negate Murlocs, making a bunch of Wisps in the process. SuperJJ setup here he can still use the there might be a lethal.
Yep. That seems like a possible lethal. You can just deny every single taunt. I mean, the one taunt. But you deny the death rattle from Eye at the same time if you don't get lethal. So that seems like a good top deck.
No taunts. We're going face, and we're going to close it out with exactly the 6 damage from from the Kalimos Lord himself, finishing off the game in a beautiful fashion. This is kind of what the power of the Elemental deck is it's got so much flexibility. It can play the control game, the aggro game, especially in the mirror match. You have to identify which one you are very early, and we saw Kolento super quickly into the game, just setting himself up to be the defensive player with the early choice to just soften up the board repeatedly, set up AoE, draw as fast as possible to find that AoE. So they both kind of knew which role they were going to be put in after the first Flame Tongue came down.
Yep. Interesting matchup, like especially when such a similar deck plays against each other, but at the same time, it's so different with the outcomes from totems. It's so different because of the flame tongue and the strategies that players are taking. So it didn't feel like the same decks are playing against each other because they was playing so different.
Well, JJ is bringing out the Paladin, and it looks like it's going to be a mid-range Pally with the Pyromancer, as we alluded to earlier, a card that doesn't always see play in the control shell. The mid-range shell, sorry, as it usually is reserved for the control builds. This is a deck that is exceptionally weak to devolve when you're looking for that early Murloc curve. So something to keep in mind as you're mulliganing going forward in the matchup.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the devolve needs to be paired up with something to have like the full effect right on the board. When it's just devolve, you just decline a possible synergy from opponent's hand, but he might not even hold the card that you're like afraid of, like the Megazord, like the Wall Eater.
Yeah, but that's really the big deal, though, is that at least you're making wisps.
Yeah.
And the amount of, devolve on a Spikered Steed is pretty costly to the Paladin player, because oftentimes they end up targeting like a crappy minion trying to make it big, and it's like, oh, hey, enjoy your wisp. No more buffs, nothing. So the Paladin just struggles to do this. Right.
And people are playing like 2 Spikered Steed and Blessing of Kings. We have seen that often already in this tournament. So the second devolves actually seem to be a pretty good tech against Paladins in general in this tournament.
And now JJ is looking at this thinking, well, I probably have to play one of these Vile Fins, but what if what if Flame Tongue comes out? How do I then follow up? I think when you've got Pyro and the coin, you shouldn't be too scared. You've got the Hydrologist, you can play a Secret alongside Pyro if you want to, so you'll find a way to double ping that board at some point without much of a worry.
Yeah. Now it's a battle of one attack minions. Not really the most fascinating spectacle to watch.
But it dictates a lot of the early game tempo, funny enough. It's really funny how Hearthstone has a lot of these things during the first 3 turns that seem meaningless, but really influence the way trades happen in the mid game.
Yep. All right, turn 2. Hydrologist seems to be like the play, but at the same time, coining out the defender is not bad, but then you lose the coin synergy with Pyromancer, which might actually be impactful against Shamans in general. So few decisions here to take from JJ, and I feel like all are valid. All have valid, reasoning behind them.
I'm partial to attacking the 1/2 with my 1/3 and then playing the Hydrologist. Because that way Flame Tongue comes out, then you're forcing the trade from the 1/2. I would be partial to just playing Hydrologist and pinging that 1/2. I guess it backfires against Healing Totem, but that means they're playing a slow game, and then you get a Gentle Megasaur somewhat early if you want one. So all seems good. Sure, ping the Totem. Works too. Prevents the trade with the Flame Tongue on the 2/2. Or on the 1/3, sorry, the value trade.
Yeah, I like that. To be honest. And you want to delete that totem next turn with the 1/3 in case your opponent doesn't do anything, right? Because you
plays around Maelstrom.
Yeah.
Ouch!
Oh man, that is, I think, one of the best drops you can get. Probably even better than Kvaldir.
In many situations, yeah, you're actually right. That is probably better than Cavalier in many spots. Huh.
There's so many things that can go wrong with that Divine Shield. They can land on a really big minion and you're like, oh man, what do I do now? It plays around Pyromancer Consecration as well. But here, JJ is taking the stands and killing everything at the same time. So there's no benefit from the Divine Shield Death Rattle effect.
Yeah, the Death Rattle effect is really the one thing that dictated this turn. I mean, granted, you get the Pyromancer back onto the board. You're setting up inequalities, so you know your opponent can't develop too much on the back of this. And you're also forcing Kolento to play around many secrets at once, trying to probe exactly what it is you've got. Kolento has to assume that this is going to be Getaway Kodo or Redemption, because this is still a very low-value Pyromancer, no matter how you look at it. It is extremely low value, and the fact that JJ is playing it now indicates that, again, it's either the Redemption or Getaway Kodo, or it is neither of those, and he simply doesn't have equality to combine with the Pyro. So a lot of information gleaned here from that one little play.
Interesting to see what JJ will do with the turn after that, because now every single turn is awkward, so he needs to invest in the defender. Let's see what he gets from it.
Well, Harrison Jones is an interesting card. I haven't seen it. Well, I mean, I've seen it, but I've not seen it much. Oh, wow. Abomination against Shaman. Seems about right.
It says destroy totems.
Yeah, destroy all the totems and reset the board state, ideally. We've had people play with Abomination a lot in tournament play. It's one of those Death Rattle cards and Taunt cards that, when discovered, are usually favored by the people who see it, because against aggro, it just gives you so much mileage. But against mid-range, it's a little bit more awkward to set up.
Well, Devolve will come in handy against another target, I guess. Luckily for Kolento, he plays 2 Devolves. I'm wondering how many Hexes he plays.
I'm going to go with 2.
I mean, the card is just too good to drop, right?
Oh, we've seen people drop to 1. It's happened before. It's just kind of uncommon. Like, you would not run, unless you're targeting Murloc Paladin super hard, in which case sometimes, double Devolve is enough, and you're just looking to play like 1 Storm, 2 Maelstroms, 2 Devolves, and 1 Hex. I still would favor the double Hex, because you're still worried about the Stonehill Defender outcomes on average. I'd respect it maybe more than enough to not drop it. Dropping Hex feels bad.
Yeah. All right. No weapon for the Harrison Jones. Abomination looks decent this turn. The Gateway Kodo is actually not bad because of the fact that you either get the Abomination or the Stonehill Defender, and your opponent is still kind of like doing nothing. The problem is the Metadata Totem says Kolento is kind of fine with doing nothing because he's getting the card advantage.
It's really, the onus is on JJ here to answer, because again, as you said, the Manatide just forces, like, the entire board state is really awkward for JJ, as he doesn't have the advantage on the board, can't really use Sunkeeper Tareem to snowball out of control, can't use Abominations as responsive, but at the end of the day, Kolento does not lose the Manatide from it, killing it. So Kolento's probably getting at least 1 to 2 more draws out of that Manatide, almost regardless of what happens.
Too bad the outcomes from the Adapt are actual stats instead of Death Rattle effect or an example Divine Shield, because that time would look actually pretty insane if it would roll that Adapt. That is just not stats, because they're being overwritten by the Tarim.
Yeah, Sunkeeper Tareem is one of those cards you have to set up to, and JJ recognizes that right now, aside from seizing board control and pulling off a miracle, there's very little left. And Devolve is, again, the biggest fear of Paladins. The biggest fear of these Murloc mid-range Paladins is Devolve. It puts you so far behind. Okay.
Look at that. That is actually not behind at all. And you know what's even more interesting? The fact that Kolento did use Devolve on this board, which wasn't really that threatening, right? So what this does tells JJ is that there's the second Devolve already in hand.
I think the board is threatening enough to Devolve. I think it's definitely realistic to expect a Devolve on one of these, like on this type of board. Because there's the possibility that Getaway Kodo, if it is Getaway Kodo, for instance, that gives you the Stonehill Defender back, and Shaman doesn't want to risk that.
Well, he was playing like it is Gateway Kodo, right? So
yeah,
for Kolento, yeah, you got a point. When he was playing like a Gateway Kodo, then the Devolve might be a really great choice here.
Still kind of complicated. JJ's probably happy to see this Spiker Steed here as, you know, you've seen one Devolve. If there's a Hex, then that's a decent Hex target for you. You've got Tyrion left in there. Can definitely put in the work later on. That Undercity Huckster is also pretty sweet. It's going to close the gap of the card advantage that was generated by the Manatide Totem a little bit. The super awkward part, though, is that this Manatide is still not dying because Stoneclaw came up on the last turn. And yeah, that complicates matters a bit.
Yeah, does he want to use the equality in this case? It's so awkward.
Do you ever trade the Huckster first and just go a bit crazy? Because if you trade the Huckster and you pick up an AoE or Fire Alley or something, that can definitely help the game stabilize. Whereas if you play the Steed, you're committing to never killing the Manatide this turn.
Yeah, that's so awkward. I guess he's just kind of like, you know what? I'm okay with you getting another card. You got so many already. I don't really, care anymore.
8 or 10 cards when you're already, far behind by 4 or 5 is probably not going to matter too much. As you're playing around the same range of cards at some point, it just becomes too wide for you to follow. I could see that. Yeah, JJ is just not looking very, very good in this spot. I mean, Kolento could just devolve again for memes, but without a Hex in hand, I think getting rid of that Spiker Seed is tempting, but it's not pressing enough an issue, I don't think.
And the only problem is that even when you kill the 5/5 and you need to kill it, you need still to deal with the 2/6. That's so annoying. Well, that's a decent outcome from the devolve.
I can't complain. I just can't complain here if I'm Kolento. You wanted to give him the weakest 1/1s, the weakest 1-drop that is, not a 1/3. And the fact that you have enough mana left over for that Hot Spring Guardian really skews the play in favor of devolve. Yeah, you're actually, you know what? Thinking back on it, I mentioned killing the 5/5 was not a pressing issue, but you almost can't fall behind on cards if you commit to this line, thanks to the Manatide Totem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you commit a lot more right now resources. I mean, this turn you commit resources to clean up the board, but at the same time you're still playing with that Manatide on your board, so you know that your opponent had problems with deleting it from the board, so you will have the access to bigger card advantage than your opponent for a very long time. And even when he draws an answer, most likely he will have to overcommit. Because of equality consecration or equality weapon or equality Truth of Charm would be actually horrible.
Yeah, it would feel absolutely awful to use the True Silver here. This is probably the best turn JJ's had this game. Closing a bit of the gap card-wise and tempo-wise. Yeah. It's been a very tough game for JJ so far. Not really any big windows of opportunity to use those Murlocs to their greatest potential. Abomination, still a very defensive card. Equality Consec, playing the control game as a mid-range Paladin deck against Shaman. Oh, man. JJ is still looking for those big top-end pushes.
Well, he's falling so much behind with the cards, and the problem is Tarim doesn't really seem to have value at any given point of the game so far. You're always behind on board, and even when you have the occasion to play it, your opponent will still have a lot of minions.
This is kind of the reason why the Shaman type of build is also so good against mid-range Paladin is because it usually has more minions on the board, so one of their biggest threats, which is Sunkeeper Tarim and the Sunkeepers that are discovered through Stonehill Defenders, are worse. And your Consecration, their Consecration lines up pretty poorly against your Maelstrom and your Devolves, since you're usually just, you have just enough minions on the board that have enough high health that they can survive through it. So you're always forcing the mid-range Paladin with little card draw to have 2-card combos to deal with the stuff that you put down, and it costs you so little to develop those minions on the board. So unless the Paladin gets a super early lead that's unanswered, the Shaman is hugely favored here.
All right. Well, he has no synergy with the Elemental yet, but it's not a problem. File Alley this turn seems decent. You get rid of the Divine Shield, and you still build the synergy up to turn 10. Your opponent did use one equality. So actually we can see Kalimos with a different outcome than usual, which usually is of course the AoE, but in this case it can be actually used as a means of getting back on the board. Now Tarim has the first time an occasion to go down and give some value.
Well, the Flame Tongue Totem with that Kalimos can be played together to clean up the board and give you an 8/8 remaining, which is bad against maybe only Aldor in the matchup, which I think is an acceptable loss, as you are keeping the Flame Tongue Totem alive. So you effectively have a 10/8, or 10/7, sorry, at the end of that turn. And 9/7. This guy's a little bit smarter than I think every time. So he's going to opt for another line of play with a double Flame Tongue, if he's not going for Kalimos just yet.
Oh, double Flame Tongue, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the only explanation for the line that he's taking. The issue is that he's basically delaying Kalimos until 2 turns from now because it's not enabled for the next turn.
Well, is it super needed, right? That's the thing. Right. Do you really need it right now? I mean, the Kalimos next turn. Probably not. Like, your opponent is still getting in an awkward situation because you have a taunt minion with a 5 attack, so he needs to clear it first. And if he actually will use a way of mass clearing the board, then at least on turn, after the next turn, you will be able to replenish the entire board.
Yeah, you have a way to refill, basically. It's like an emergency button 2 turns from now, which should be enough against Paladin, because there's no bursty comeback from the Paladin player. The mana count is always too awkward to get back those huge equality counts like into tempo turns, and it's still difficult to end up killing 2 3s on the board as Paladin. You would need a second Wild Pyro with Consecration. Yeah, I can get behind that. And JJ's got a pseudo consec with the A-bomb, but it's not perfect in this spot. Not even close.
And you know what's even more interesting? The Mana Tide Totem gave so many cards to Kolento, and look at that. He is still like almost on the same page as JJ right now when it comes to the card advantage in hand.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen Servants of Kalimos. You know, that's one of the big things too, is that in that deck, that's a value generator that can do a lot of work. And it just wasn't found yet.
Deck. Look at that. So many scenario cards like Bloodlust, like Devolve, which kinda hurt your consistency, but at the same time, when you're playing against a slower deck, you're able to get the value out of them at some point. So fortunately for Kolento, he didn't face a aggro lineup from JJ because he could have just been smashed to pieces with having so many just cards that require a specific board state.
Yeah, it can be kind of difficult. I mean, you still have a slight edge over something like Pirate Warrior. Well, a pretty good edge against Pirate Warrior, let's say, and Token Druid. So I think the Elemental Shaman is weirdly positioned whereby it beats mid-ranges and it tends to beat aggro, but it suffers against like burn decks. So, like, let's say the Burn Mage came out of JJ this game, this would have been a very difficult matchup for Shaman. Or if it faced off against like a slower Priest, which JJ has in the lineup, by the way, you know, we could still see that happen. Kolento's deck could end up, you know, struggling to win those. But if it wins now, at least in the Conquest format, it will not have to worry about that again. Very well-rounded lineups from these players. Nothing all in. It's not like a single strategy and committing to it.
Yeah. JJ didn't get a single huge value card yet, right? There was only Tarim.
Oh, that was it, yeah.
So his top decks should be decent, at least in the next turns. There's the chance, actually, of doing that. But for Kolento, this is such an easy turn, right?
This is such a sick turn. This is where you want your Bloodlust to be. If you had the choice of choosing how to make a Bloodlust happen, you would choose this. You would fill the board up, and you would Bloodlust after that when SuperJJ just stares down your You're a 7/7. You're 5/5 with almost nothing.
Oh, look at that. That's convenient.
Well, that's convenient. Does that mean JJ could still come back here? He is still technically ahead right now.
If Kolento will not roll a healing totem or will not get a Hot Spring Guardian, but I think he actually used to already.
He is
in the pickle. Like, this is so awkward.
There was no drop better than this in JJ's deck.
There's the healing totem, which is important for Kolento, because now he can even spare the attack into his opponent. But at the same time, he can just play Tar Creeper and not do anything.
Do you ever just Bloodlust here to guarantee to kill the Drake so it doesn't extract value?
Might be good.
Because I'm looking at this Drake and I'm thinking, if I let it swing into my 3/5, I'm losing value for no reason, and then sometimes I get a little bit punished. It's not, unrealistic, but the Tyrion's a possibility still. You still haven't seen the power cards in that deck. Kind of scary. I mean, if it trades into the Tar Creeper, then it means your 7/1 is going to stick around. JJ, however, has the Outdoor Peacekeeper to make that Kalamos a lot less of a scary card, and that pickup can also get him some extra value with the hero power he's setting up. Wow. This game is still very much anyone's game, given the fact that the 7/2 is going to be nullified. The Bloodlust can be used as a trading tool at this point, though, which is interesting. Not usually how you see Bloodlust played.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to use it as a trading tool. Otherwise, you're just always falling behind. But never mind, the Twilight Hammer can actually change this, because now what it can do is play the Twilight Hammer, kill the War Leader, roll a totem.
How about we go face?
Nah, I like killing.
I mean, we're killing him next turn. We're setting up lethal if we go face with everything.
But
right, we lose to Tyrion, Steed, and Sunkeeper, as well as Stonehill number 2.
So that's a lot, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of outs. I guess you're right. Yeah.
I just like killing War Leaders like all the time. They just give so much value to the hero power. Basically, they create you actually get a card advantage, because 2 mana 3/2 is a vanilla card. That means you're getting a vanilla card out of hero power every single turn.
So here's my question: let's assume I kill a War Leader here and something big comes down, do I ever win as Kolento? That's why I'm looking at this, lethal push as an avenue of.
Well, if something big will pop out, you lose eventually anyway. If you use the Bloodlust this turn, and something big pops out, you lose. So, not sure about it.
I think it's a lot closer than it seems at first. I think it's a much, much closer call than it seemed. Now, both players finding weapons is great. I mean, we're talking about those super tight spots. I think the draw favors JJ in terms of what he's likely to find to close the game out, with a single Tyrion, for instance, coming out if Kolento doesn't pick up a Hex. So I would favor JJ, but the thing is, Kolento's Bloodlust is a looming lethal whenever he gets bored for whatever reason.
Yeah, and that's problematic for JJ. But at the same time, Kolento now didn't play a single elemental, and that means every single card that has an elemental synergy will not have the value. So Seventh of Kalamos now is just a vanilla 4/5 that doesn't really do much, and that's also instrumental. But cards like this, Jade Lightning,
that's 11 damage if everything went face. But there's no reason to at this point.
Yeah, I think you just kill the minion, attack the 1/1 with the weapon, just go face. That's the question. It depends. I think you just go face.
I'd like face, because that way, if the opponent ends up using, let's say, the War Leader to buff up the 1/1, kill your 3/3, you still have 2 minions left over, and that's the most Bloodlust damage.
Consecration is a problem, though.
Oh my god.
That's a good roll as well.
That's insane! JJ was on the cusp of getting Bloodlusted.
Well, he's going down to how much HP? This is 3, 6, 9. Wait, 3, 6,
13. Yeah, he's
11.
Gonna be fine.
Yeah, okay.
He is fine.
So
he is gonna be just fine. And now, funny enough, trying to force the Kolento, trading back, is gonna be forced again into the trading position, which is not where you want to be at this point in the game. Maelstrom Portal will help clean up all these things. Stone Tusk board wins the game, right? Patches as well?
Yes. Stone Tiles 4 patches. I mean, this is +4, right? So you have, wait, 11? It's actually not enough.
I think it's one off.
You have 9, 13,
yeah,
14, 17 damage, yes.
Well, now you can Bloodlust to trade. That's definitely something you can look at as an avenue, because I don't think you want that Ragnaros to extract any more value going forward.
I agree. It will put you out of reach of winning this game super fast.
Yep, keeping the maximum possible damage output over a few turns, with the 4-2 staying alive, setting up a 2-turn lethal on SuperJJ, who needs to pick up himself a Consecration!
Oh, God. What a game! Back-to-back, like, crucial cards for JJ, although we have to say, he was missing a lot of those key cards in the beginning. So he has to get them at some point, right? Fortunately for Kolento, now he gets to pick up a Elemental this turn, and that means his servants might be a saving grace next turn. And a Tyrion for JJ.
Is there a hex for Kolento? That's the question, because at this point we've seen the and that's the hex for Kolento. What is this game?
No reaction from JJ though. It was like,
of course not. He's looking at this thinking, yeah, I mean, he's overdue. He's almost got 0 cards left in that deck. How can I expect him not to have it? And he's going to play the Wild Power because there are no supporting cards left to make it viable with Equality gone. And J-Claws for Kolento is going to give him the biggest board, almost able to close out the game on the following turn. JJ with very little left to handle this. Tareem doesn't do it. Sunkeeper doesn't leave him with enough mana to keep going. I mean, is it down to like a War Leader to stay alive by 1 extra turn?
No.
I mean, there's so little left. He can still survive.
Man, what does he need next turn? He still has Consecration in his deck.
No, he's played all of those.
Did he play
one very early in the game, and the second one just came up now.
Imagine if that Hex wouldn't have been drawn. Man, could have been turned around.
I mean, at least you get an extra clear on this board, so the 2-3 would be dead, and that means that JJ suddenly is no longer on a single turn clock, but on a 2 to 3 turn clock, which makes things a little bit more awkward for him, for Kolento that is. And now the Hex here is insurance against anything bad that can potentially happen. Oh. Megasaur. Let's get some 0-1 plants. Poisonous, I guess. Poisonous is amazing, actually. In this
Poisonous
spot.
helps, yes. +1/+1 is also okay.
Yeah, +1/+1 seems fairly reasonable given that everything has 2 health. +3 attack doesn't really do anything else that +1/+1
That's a dead
does.
card, I would say. You don't want to play Mana-Tide Totem when you have only 3 cards left in your deck, because if for some reason JJ will defend himself, you can lose the fatigue.
It would take a while, though, right? Like, even if Sunkeeper Tareem comes out, you still end up winning.
But you only get one card, right?
I think there's 2 cards left in the deck, yeah. So he's got about 3 turns. Like, he needs about 5 turns to lose. I guess there's always the weird case scenario where JJ discovers another abomination, then your board gets cleaned up, and then everything goes wrong. But you have enough time to find a healing totem in that spot, so... I mean, you could technically Stonehill Defender into Primordial Drake, and that would suck. So Kolento's probably just going to take the maximum tempo plays he can at this point. It's just such nonsense. He needs to close out this game.
Interesting enough, I think Kolento just doesn't play Serv versus Kalimos.
Yeah, I was going to mention it earlier, you know, when we were talking about it, because I think when you're running the Jade package, you're substituting the Elemental Value package with the Kalimos one. So you're playing Elementals for the defensive potential they have. That's Tolvir Stoneshaper, that's Hot Spring Guardian, that is the Kalimos, you know, the Lord himself. We've seen versions cut down to 1 Servant. We've seen some of them run 0 when Jade is included. But I wouldn't say that it's become like the norm yet. It is still very much a card that is played in the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. SuperJJ picked up actually a crucial card, which is the Defender, to go into a Bruiser, which gives him an option to come back.
I mean, I can't even believe he's still in this game. I think he's got a legitimate Sunkeeper Tareem in here. I forget, because I know...
No, he used Sunkeeper Tareem.
From the Stone... Wasn't it from the Stonehill?
Was it? Maybe you're right.
Maybe I'm not. We'll see what JJ has either way.
It's a
Secret.
hydrologist.
Getaway Kodo. Redemption. Okay.
Redemption is bad. Noble Sacrifice is actually a very similar outcome. But at the same time, redemption gives you more value if your opponent did use directional projectiles like Jade Lightnings.
Yeah, they've already been played, so at this point, JJ is looking at board trade. So he's thinking, if I play redemption, then I get 3 minions out of that one bruiser, since I get the 4/2 and then the 1/1, and then I also get the extra 1/2 smashing into it. So redemption and noble sac both achieve very similar goals here.
Wow. JJ is still in this game. That's incredible.
He's got a war leader left, I think, and that war leader could turn these Murlocs into complete terrors.
Oh, what a hard-hitting card.
Terror enough to beat this, though. That's another question, because that's a big draw. But that war leader, though.
If it is a war leader, if there is a war leader left,
I feel like there is. I might be wrong though. Could be just a complete nonsense minion that does nothing.
Let's see, what will JJ draw? Will he be in the game still after this turn? There's a war leader.
Okay, so we can kill one of the minions on this board, but it's not looking brilliant. We have to trade everything away just to kill a single Jade. Then we're forcing Aya Blackpot to trade, but we're probably dead in fatigue within a turn or two. So the edge is still very much on Kolento's side. JJ being forced into a really awkward spot. Kolento has no incentive to stop himself here. Just try to connect the face and protect yourself behind this wall of Stoneclaw and Hot Spring, which are guaranteed to protect your Aya Blackclaw, unless something goes awfully wrong, and I can't even think of what that would be. Kolento's got this completely locked up.
Lay on hands this turn. It's actually not the best draw at all. There's the Peacekeeper. JJ concedes before seeing his last card in the deck. Man, this took ages. I think it was actually 35 minutes of gameplay.
Yeah, but I'm not really surprised, right? These are value games, and the thing is, when it comes down to value decks, that is, and we're talking about value deck versus value deck, if they both draw equally, and none of them finds, that crazy swing turn that auto-locks the game, like that Bloodlust in Kolento's hand, with a different outcome and no consecration, closed out the game very early. There were many spots where, JJ got Primordial Drake exactly when he needed it. Consec was not enough. He needed the Drake. Found it off the top. So every single draw that came up just kind of put him further and further away, or Kolento further away from winning automatically. So those games can go super long.
And they didn't, but now we're jumping into Paladin versus Paladin. And this can actually go very fast. Because if there's no equality for those big minions, or if Finja, just gets going, brings up the minions, you can finish up the game with just one swing.
Yeah, it really depends, though, if Kolento is running the Equality Pyro shenanigans as well, because we saw that JJ is running them, and that can help equalize the matchup a bit in his favor when he's, getting the slower start. In this case, though, he's going to be the aggressive one. He's got the Rockpool Hunter with the 1/3, one of the best openers you can hope for, barring the Tide Color for the sake of pushing damage. And Kolento is going to pray that there is no Rockpool here, as things would be a little bit difficult to handle afterwards.
That's such a blowout turn when you think about it. Your opponent not only is left with bigger minions than he had in the previous turn, he also gained card advantage, board advantage. Man, this is such a blowout.
And you've also got no real way to confirm that there's no war leader in there, and that's a big deal, because if there's a war leader, let's assume you're in a normal game and you know there's no war leader, you can coin out Aldor and assume this contests the minions very nicely. The issue is now you're looking at a 2/2 that throws itself to die into the minions on the board, so that coin has no usage this turn that feels good.
Such an awkward situation. So now we see Redemption being picked up, which is great if you play Finja. Like, you can play Finja on 10-5 with coin Redemption to guarantee it being alive, even when your opponent did use like Pyromancer Equality. Of course, if you didn't have anything else on board at the same time.
Well, that's an interesting spot. JJ did not find the swing card he was looking for at this point. He wanted another Rockpool Hunter. He wanted the War Leader. No Cold Light Seers in the list that we've seen, given that he's running the Wild Pyromancer removal package. So probably is like there's two options. Either you play for tempo with the Aldor, or you just go for the hero power, which unfortunately, because you're first player with the initiator's advantage, is usually not optimal. You should take advantage of your tempo if you can in the matchup, and set up for that Sunkeeper as fast as possible by having the widest board. Oh man. Here we go.
Well, he's playing into a consecration to some degree, but at the same time you can't really play around it. All depends what kind of secret did you get? Do you want to play the secret or just get the minion out of the hero power? Especially since you still have a chance to top deck a Megazord next turn or just a War Leader, so that hero power is not like just a 1/1. It's actually a valid card in your deck right now.
I really like Redemption in the matchup if the game goes long and you're the one who had a very early curve. So I would be tempted to keep it just because I know that I can get more mileage out of it than just the Murlocs I've got on board. But on the flip side, the upside of using Redemption is that you're guaranteeing an extra body, but you can do that on turn 5 since you've already got nothing else to do.
Agree.
Yeah,
such a weird situation.
Sunkeepers do good. Oh man. I'm gonna predict coin Finja, but I'm no expert.
Seems like a decent spot, especially since if your opponent wants to kill it, he needs to use equality on his bigger board. So that's such an awkward position for JJ.
Respecting the power of Murlocs. Is getting rid of that the Rockpool Hunter. Harrison Jones not beautiful here, but will find value later on. And now JJ might go for the Redemption hero power pyro play. It just goes the widest he possibly can. I've seen a fair share of these things in my time.
Well,
how much does he value this?
He needs just to keep the Pyromancer quality for after Finja gets the value. Not away. But the problematic card will be a War Leader.
Yeah, War Leader ends up buffing the minions out of equality range. For those of you who are not familiar with the mechanic, as it buffs the health of the minions permanently. It's not just a thing that is applied once. Equality tries to set the health of the minions at 1, and War Leader bumps it back up to 2. So picking up off the top here with the draw that he had, guarantees that he's going to have that War Leader. Alternatively, Megasaur into Divine Shield is oftentimes enough. +1/+1.
Oh, Stealth is not bad. Stealth, you just get the value out of Finja next turn again. Your opponent is in the same pickle as he was.
And you know what Redemption brings out? That's Finja. Assuming you stealth it. And he consecrates.
Well, the Megazord doesn't get its stealth, right?
Oh, that's true. I guess he would kill the Megazord first every single time.
Yeah.
So Sunkeeper Tareem is playable here, but
oh, it's not bad. It's actually like keeping the board clear, most likely, and your opponent is getting the revival on the basic stats anyway. Wow.
Fair enough. I was expecting him to kill the 3/3 first, the Vilefin Inquisitor first. Kolento rubbing his chin, an error to be sure, says JJ, and indeed an error that was.
Man,
as he suddenly finds himself staring down the worst of the worst possible outcomes.
This is like the one-on-one Hearthstone secrets play, right? You play around the Redemption first. Especially when your opponent has multiple minions with such a low value. The opponent
knew it.
Yeah.
He knew it. And it slipped his mind for a split
He knew
second.
it and he blew it.
Been there, done that. Everybody makes it's like that one thing you never learn. Equality on War Leader doesn't work, and you just see a board full of Murlocs, and you just snap play, and then you end up dropping 3 cards into it that do nothing. And SuperJJ recognizes, you know what? I'm never winning this on trades anymore. I just have to go all in. And, frankly, I don't think he's wrong. I think this might just be the one line of play he's got to give himself a chance here.
I agree. Like, this is the pace of the game where he had to switch the gear, go from reverse to actually forward. In this case, defense offense.
he's been on like Kolento's been on the defense since the beginning, right? SuperJJ had a decent opener, picked up 2 minions that turned into one another very nicely. So JJ's always been ahead in the game, and the Finja, threatened to turn the tide. And unfortunately for JJ, he let it do it, and he might let it do it again, given the way things are lining up.
All right. If there's a second, no, it doesn't change anything. A second World Leader still doesn't keep the Finja alive. There is a second one.
That's a lot of damage. I think you just have to be safe rather than sorry, though.
Yeah, at 9 HP, I don't really want to get wrecked by some Murlocs,
That equality pyro is completely useless. Let's just discard it as an option. As we said, the War Leaders will keep everything alive. Yeah. So it looks like Spiker's Steed is the closest thing to a playable card as we've got this turn on JJ's side. Hopefully, from his perspective, he's hoping to soften up the War Leaders. The issue is that you have to kill them before you equality, and that's just... that's
It's
awful.
a tough nut to crack. Just say it like that. Tarim. Well, it changes the base stats, and then it adds the modifiers from War Leaders. So...
Yeah, they would not change because they've already been Tareemed, most of them. The only thing you'd...
Oh, you're right. They are under Tareem. Like the two most left Murlocs.
Yeah. Everything's Tareemed right now. So the only thing... Actually, it's just a debuff, basically. You're debuffing your opponent's stuff, which is really important in this spot. So it's a pretty big deal. It buffs your little 6/5, and then that's about all you needed. What a turn! Yep. What a turn.
Now it's the case of which one do I want to trade first? And I feel like you never want to attack with the War Leaders.
Well, the thing with attacking with War Leaders is that unless the guy has Pyro into Spell, into Equality, you're fine. As long as you keep one War Leader alive, right? Mm-hmm. So you'd have to have exactly Pyro into Hammer of Wrath into Equality. I mean, we're talking about some highly specific scenario. Nice try, JJ. Nice try, mate. I rate 8 out of 8. And that is going to be game in favor of Kolento.
Wow. I mean, it was a throw, right? With that redemption.
I want to say the game was still potentially Kolento's, but the extra 2 Murlocs he got just shut out JJ completely. Where JJ had an opportunity to be offensive, set the opponent's health at 9 without Finja, being a threat. The way that it developed and the way that he played the turn forced him to go all in, and suddenly the board was always going to get away from him after that point. So yeah, I think maybe this was just throwing out the one chance you had at victory out the window.
Sad to see, because JJ was so on his toes in the previous match. Maybe the exhaustion from that match was actually getting to him. But a simple mistake did cost him this match, and now he has to get back on his feet against this Dread Druid. And this is not an easy task.
Well, I would rather be the Paladin here if you give me the choice of being one of the 2 characters. Like, you can definitely do more work as Paladin against J Druid than you can as J Druid against Paladin. It's pretty tough to compete with the openers that those Murlocs get. I think that might have been even truer in the earlier days of mid-range Pally when they were running Cold Light Seers, because that gave them an extra out where they could just blow up the size of those Murlocs and shut you out. But nowadays maybe it's a bit easier, right? Because they're only relying on Megasaur and Rockpool Hunters and War Leaders, so they have 6 instead of 8, maybe.
All right. To attack. Again, the same opener from JJ. But the problem is, like, if Kolento picks up a decent acceleration, he can get back on the board pretty fast. Unless JJ will get the War Leaders and the Megazord rolling, and that means he can blow out the Druid out of the water, because if the Murlocs just get out of the range of like a swipe, and the swipe just kills one target, doesn't help to clear out the other ones, you're in a pickle. Like, Druid has no way of dealing with those minions.
I mean, you can edge out Paladin a lot with a deck like J Druid. You can make a deck that's highly, I wouldn't say favored because that would be lying, but that can beat that type of Murloc deck better. But the issue is, like, a card like General Megasaur with Poisonous is so tough to stop. If they just have 1/1s on the board, those have a ton of value. So at some point, you kind of just fall behind by virtue of the potential of these 1/1s. You're running out of swipes at some stage, and they just blow you out in one turn. So it's very tough for the J Druid to come back here once he loses the early game.
Yeah, I agree. And Kolento is looking like his strategy is just to not play around the Megazord, not play around the Wall Eater. He just wants to get on the board as fast as possible, and I like this approach because I think that's the only one when you can actually win when opponent whiffs. When he has already Murlocs on board, you will find behind every single turn when you just swipe or when you Wrath. You need minions on board right now.
That's kind of complicated to do. I mean, that's what he's been lining up for with that Jade Blossom, trying to get into, his way back into it. The swipe is the fastest he can get back on the board, assuming his opponent doesn't have any follow-up. You're denying any type of big swing turn with Megasaur. But if JJ, we're holding on to, say, 1 to 2 Murlocs still with the hero power, you're liable to just get blown back out again.
On this situation, it's actually pretty good pickup. The turn 5 Harrison Johns, not bad. You don't have.
You can play it as just a 5/4 for tempo's sake. I think that's okay. There's no weapon in the deck, so you'll never find better value out of it. The question is, do you ever use that coin early? And I don't know if that's worth much when you can play 3 Murlocs. It's like those Murlocs are really a big deal for Kolento. They really threaten lethal pretty much anytime they're left alive.
11 HP.
That's what JJ wants to do. He's got the True Silver Champion. He's got the Coin Tyrion. He's got all the damage he needs over time, assuming nothing comes to stop him. The big issue here is that this behemoth is posing a bit of a problem where, you can play the weapon to clean this up, and you can rely on your Tyrion to carry you forward as a follow-up. But if JJ has armor gain and has his own line of taunts and starts making 4/4s and 5/5s and 6/6s, this gets awkward. So you're almost banking on there not being enough armor gain to outvalue your Ashbringer. So that's pretty tough to ask, basically.
But still, he has access to almost infinite life gain at some point in the game. Like, especially with those Feral Rages, they always give you 8. Sure. You have Fandral already. If you get to a really big Jade Golems, and that's possible, because he's at 3/3, and every single card right now will give him access to bigger ones. The hardened scales will actually be very beneficial, and we know that if JJ will not be in a position when he will threaten a burst kill, Druid can just maintain his health high enough to not die with one turn, but still try to build up the board while healing a little bit.
Yeah, and this is exactly what the Fandral helps to do here. I mean, there's always the option to keep both Feral Rages for turn 10 with Fandral, but you're oftentimes not killing a single target with that. You're going a little bit wider, and in this case, Kolento is just hoping that him setting up that Fandral means that he's forcing SuperJJ to be reactive with, say, a Consecration, right? You want the opponent to feel so threatened that they have to consecrate and slow down. But in this spot, the Primordial Drake in JJ's deck just completely takes control of the game once again. And that means that JJ basically had a really sick opener into a decent mid-game and is finally transitioning into the power plays of the late game with that Tyrion Forging. This is what mid-range Paladin wants to do the most.
Yep. And now Kolento is even more stuck with those cards that he got from the Nourish. 2 Earthen Scales, into a Wrath, into Wild Growth. There was possible turn, by the way, to draw Wild Growth because it's already on 9, so you can't really play it. To either get the card draw, to either accelerate. So it's basically dead until the next turn. So now what you're looking for is just to survive long enough to put big minions next turn.
Yeah, but this is going to be tough. Yeah, but this is going to be difficult, right? I mean, we're looking at the strongest minion single-handedly in that Paladin deck. You have an empty board. You have 21 health against 10 damage coming in. Even with the taunt that you have set up in the way and that you're trying to stop from coming in and hitting you in the face repeatedly, unless the deck runs Harrison Jones, and we've seen some Druids try that, it's going to be extremely tough for Kolento to catch up.
Yeah. It definitely will be. But it's even interesting because I was thinking about the fact that maybe you just don't want to kill the Tyrion this turn. Maybe you want to get the value out of the weapon delayed by 1 turn, right? Because your opponent will just benefit from that 1 turn of swinging the Ashbringer.
Sure, I could see that. I mean, but the thing is, like, you're so far behind. I mean, I guess if those wild growths carry you forward with more minions, then that's viable, because suddenly, like, that time matters. But right now, it looks like with the amount of health he's looking at, he's going to need to find some big J's and quick.
Well, he found 1. It's, of course, not enough.
Wow, nice Stonehill Defender you got there, JJ.
The Faceless Shambler is nuts.
That is
4/6
so
or 6/4. I guess 4/6 is more than enough, right? Oh, no, wait. You're playing against Jade Druid. The 6/4 is actually more importanter, I would say.
More importanter, yeah. It's probably more importanter, you're right.
The biceps is important, but, you know. I didn't play CSGO, never mind. It's a meme from Passion.
Rush B. That's all I know.
That meme is known by
That is all I know is Rush B. That's all I know, literally. I'm the most useless CSGO reference person in the entirety of this gaming scene. Alright, do you want to make it 3-5? We can make it 3-5, Lothar.
That's fantastic. Let's see what he will get. What are the cards that he's looking for?
The biggest Jade generators possible. He's looking for Aya Blackpaw into Earthen Scales twice. He's looking for a miracle.
Man, this is not looking good. How much damage is that coming in? If you play the Tau Creeper, you just soak up to 5 damage from the Ashbringer. That means 10 damage is coming to your face. You're left at 7. You can go for the Jade Idol this turn. I think you should use the Wild Growth this turn as well.
I mean, you'd have to innovate it out, though, if you did, right? How about just Jade Idol, and then you set up the biggest Aya into double Earthen Scales you can?
Oh, wow.
Not
they didn't go for the Jade Idol. Interesting.
Oh, I see. We're hoping for Gaddison Auctioneer. This is what it is. We're just all in on that 1 card.
Okay.
We're just all in on Gaddison, trying to cycle every single thing left in our deck. That is basically...
The problem is that the Earthen Scale can't really be played on small minions. They need to be massive. They need to get...
they're 4/4 for now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanos. Not the card that they're looking for right now.
That's kind of cute. Oh, hello! At least we found one of the few cards we were looking to get. Let's get going. Double Innervate.
Oh my god, okay. Well,
he might be able to make a Jade big enough. Let me think. It could be a 7/7, so he could get 14 health at the end of that day, right? It's possible.
Okay. He has another Innervate.
He can do it.
Go fast. Go fast, Kolento. You need that time.
You gotta just double Innervate to open with. See what you can pick up. Double Jade Idol! Is he gonna make it? I mean, it doesn't matter because Sunkeeper is there to stall him, but it's enough to make the biggest possible J's and survive 1 turn. And now he's looking at this like, wait, I need the 12 health here.
You can actually use the Wrath instead. Because the Wrath kills the Wall Eater, so it gives the same outcome, almost. It's different by 2 HP.
Yeah, but he also needs to make the bigger minion he can and cycle through to like Jade Behemoth and card draw. I think the damage on the board is just too big. He needed another Jade, I think, to survive 1 turn. He needed to get triple Jade Idol into double Earthen Scales, I think, to be left with like a fraction of the HP he needs to survive. Oh, man. That was cute.
Oh. 2-2 between those 2 players now. Final battle. Priest is appearing.
This is one of the coolest matchups because historically Dragon Priest was super good against Jade Druid, but the things have kind of changed with the expansion after the loss of, Twilight Guardian. You don't get as big minions as early, so you can still get those Twilight Drakes, you can still get those operatives, but your curve is slightly delayed. No more Wormist Agent cheating. Looks like it's not Dragon Priest. Oh, goodness.
Well, we have seen Lyra, right? So...
Miracle, Silence, Control. That's Silence Priest. That is Purify Priest. Not a single matchup in the game is better than Jade Druid for you if you're JJ.
Yep.
JJ's gotta be happy. Such a good matchup for Purify Priest.
Man, that's nuts.
That is crazy.
Well, yeah, he has an insane start as well.
He's got the opener, man. He's got the silence. He can buff up the Ancient Watcher after silencing to then get himself the biggest possible minion. Jade ramps up fast once they get the mana count, but until they do, they're pretty slow.
I'm thinking you can actually go for the Radiant Elemental here.
Yeah, I kind of like that, actually. Now that we see that, you get to cycle the card, but, I mean, is there any benefit to not taking a 3/3 body on the board, right? Is what I'm looking at. Because you can kill a Jade Spirit that comes out on 4, which is a bit better than the Radiant Ellie. I would favor the Talon Priest still. Because you can still get that draw later. You could get even double Radiant into a few cycles on 4.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Seems better. Although, you need to attack with the... Oh, he did not. Okay.
And not this turn. You probably have to conserve your health so that you don't... Because the Druid has no good turn here, barring Jade Spirit. So if you can force him not to get a good swipe either, you're good. And if he has to swipe this turn, then all the better for you. It's making him slow down.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Makes sense. Now it's really awkward for Kolento.
You could wrath your power, but come on, man. This feels so awful.
Now this is the point where Evans scales are so horrible to see in your hand. It's like, this card is useless. I don't want it. I want something else. Can I mulligan that way, please? No way.
It's funny because like Feral Rage and Earthen Scales in this matchup are particularly bad because Feral Rage only finds like Cabal Talon Priest as a target, and the rest is just either too big or has too much attack for you to justify attacking into it, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it's so tough. It's so difficult for Kolento here. I like this line of play here, forcing the 4/5 to be on the board. 4/6, that is. Can't be killed by Shadow Words, death, or pain, assuming things went a bit differently. I really, really like this line of play.
Well, now this is so many things to be considered. Like Acolyte of Pain with the shield, I actually like it very much. So you can wait with the Radiant Elemental to your first Shadow Vision, and you still get the card draw because you know Kolento is not playing any silences. So a 5 HP Acolyte of Pain will actually give you guaranteed 2 cards minimum.
Yeah. I can see that value being important here. You're looking at turn 5, so there's nothing crazy coming up unless there's like Fangel, Jade Idol, and even then that's sort of mild. So I like setting up the card draw.
Okay, there's only one card that can actually help here. It's Feral Rage and Hero Power will kill it, but that's about it.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, if that's what he does, right? Because that's a very weak turn. It transitions you into your follow-up super nicely. But whatever punishes you, usually in this matchup, is something you can bear with, which is why I think Purify Priest is so favored. You get big bodies, and the removal from the Druid side and the health gain don't matter. They can gain 20 to 40 armor if they want. You're still two-shotting them. Like, that's the beauty of Purify Priest.
Yep. Well, it seems like an Orge. Like, can't really do anything else, right? If you use the
issue is, do we draw or do we ramp up? Because ramping up opens up more opportunities afterwards. It lets us maybe be more flexible. But like, do we ever play the Drake next turn? I don't think we are.
You just want to play Behemoth next turn. I feel like the only way of winning this game would be getting the Jade Idols as fast as possible. I mean, sorry, the Jade Golems as fast as possible.
But the issue with that is that you can do the same thing by nourishing after you do this. So you're just opening up more flexible turns on your follow-up. And you're forcing the priest to slow down by attacking. So I think getting the crystals now gives you more leverage with that 2/6, because the opponent has to respect it. Because suddenly your minions are within Drake range.
Okay. Another interesting turn from JJ. The Faceless Shambler. Actually, now, because of the fact that he plays Shambler, maybe the Power Word Shield shouldn't be a consideration to be played on on the Ancient Watcher, but at the same time, if you don't have it in hand, it's better to play it on the Acolyte of Pain, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find so many more health minions. Like, copying at 4/6 is just weak in this type of deck, right? Like, you're looking to get that 4/12. You're looking for big minions, and this is just not big enough. But what an awkward board state for JJ. He's keeping those elementals for Lyra, clearly. Trying to set up a late game Lyra. Probably going to have to draw with that Acolyte now, if only to get himself some cycle going. Maybe play the Wild Pyro on its own after healing the Watcher. This is all sort of clunky. Alright, so he's just opting for the small minion, playing around the Primordial Drake, not getting any kills since that 2/6 does not get to connect.
And
he read into Kolento's last turn very nicely. Wonder if SuperJJ plays Circle of Healing in the list.
No idea.
I've seen some, but not too many, so it's an interesting... I wouldn't call it a tech choice, but let's just say it wasn't there in the initial list. But then it's kind of changed a lot, right? You've seen a lot of Circles of Healing in these lists, because one of the reasons you lose so often with this deck is you don't draw anything. And usually you have high enough health minions that you can get job done, and when you're starting to splash in Wild Pyro to tech against aggro decks, it's even better.
Is someone injured?
Starting with a draw, of course. To get more info, what can you do? Oh.
That's
a combo.
draw. Okay. That's,
Well, that's a 10/10 Acolyte of Pain, right?
We could play Rated Elemental first if we wanted. But it's not
I would
necessary.
still like keep it in the hand.
Sure. I think you're right. That's probably better. Yeah.
10/10 Acolyte of Pain. Seems like a problematic card to deal with when you are Druid. And you use a Rav, and you use a Swipe. So, and there's no Poison Seeds in this format.
I can see.
No mulch, no poison seeds. Kolento's just gonna say, let me not waste any of our time, man. I know how this is gonna end. I've played this matchup enough. No point even trying. And JJ is gonna take it 3-2 in a pretty close series overall, aside from the last match that was just a complete blowout.
But
Purified Priest is real, man. Silenced Priest is a real deck.
It didn't seem like a good match for Kolento in general, like the blowout loss with that Vinja being resurrected from the redemption when he made the attack first without checking for redemption. That could have like ended up badly, like really badly. So good for him. He did make the comeback, and now, well, he picked up his first win in the group.
Yeah, I'm kind of. It was an interesting series. I feel like today was interesting. We had a quest milled for Rogue from Stanodachi. We had an arrow with a secret sequencing from JJ's. Those are the plays that I don't expect from these players. I usually expect some very refined and fine-tuned sequencing of plays, but unfortunately, they're getting tired. A lot of Chinese events going on, and these guys are bad from the trip. Basically, is the excuse we're gonna have to give them. That being said, guys, we'll be taking a short break before we move on to the next match of the day. Stanodachi versus Show. Stanodachi coming back. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.